Apparently, Bernie supporters have been as usual, not in a definitely not surprising news here, but they've been accused of being racist Bernie Bros again, and this is an attack that was lobbed by several, I think, Black African American activists who are apparently part of the Working Families Party. Now, this is the party. Working Families Party is the organization that endorsed Elizabeth Warren over Bernie Sanders. And following this development, a lot of Bernie supporters were upset, and they called out the Working Families Party for what they felt were actual examples of corruption within the organization. And they basically took to Twitter and said things that unsurprisingly upset the Working Families Party and members of their organization. And so let's see here. So there was an article in splinternews.com, which is usually a pretty good publication. They cover really important topics, progressive topics, progressive, issues and stuff. But here it seems like they're kind of legitimizing this rank propaganda, fear-mongering, just, bullshit about Bernie supporters. And in a second, I'm going to get to why that's bullshit. But first, let me read this article here. So, again, this is from splinternews.com, and the title of the article is Black Leaders Signed Letter Condemning Attacks by Sanders Supporters. So they've made it clear from the get-go, whether it's, publications or whether it's the people that are making these accusations, they are making sure to let everybody know that this is representative of all Bernie Sanders supporters. This is not just a couple of people, randomly on Twitter or social media. Of course, you'll be surprised to find out that there is an interesting twist to that story. But first, let's get to the article. So, the article starts off by saying, in a draft letter obtained by Splinter on Thursday, dozens of prominent Black progressive leaders condemned the, quote, hateful, violent, and racist threats they said have been leveled by, quote, self-identified Bernie Sanders supporters against Black leaders in the wake of the Working Families Party's endorsement of Elizabeth Warren for president. One of the letter's signatories, Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrisse Cullors, I don't know how you pronounce that, said in an email that the version of the letter obtained by Splinter was not final. The WFP made a decision with its members and supporters and staff, and there is now conflict over the substance of that decision. Of that decision. The letter reads in part. And then there's this kind of, I guess, a part of the letter that's quoted by the author, which is Catherine Kruger. She quotes a part of the letter here and says, it continues, but let's also be clear, the WFP is under new leadership. For the first time in its history, Maurice Mitchell, a Black man with decades of experience building movements and strengthening our democracy, alongside Nalini Stamp, a working-class woman of color and a gifted organizer with a long list of accomplishments, are now at the helm of the party where they should be, and apparently some folks aren't happy about it. These incredible leaders who led an organization to take a risk by lifting up the leadership of Black, Latinx, Asian, and Pacific Islander and white communities and coalescing around a candidate with enough time to engage the communities deeply ahead of the 2020 election are being threatened on a daily basis by self-identified Sanders supporters with hateful, violent, and racist threats. Uncle Tom, slave, and then the C word, C-U-N-T. I'm not going to say that. These kinds of threats have no place in our movements and are reminiscent of the threats Black people would receive when daring to vote, even though the white supremacists would try and discourage Black people from doing so. So you see what they're trying to do here? So this is what they're doing. They're trying to compare Bernie Sanders to white supremacists. So I don't know if you guys know, I don't know if these people know, but the white supremacists are the ones supporting Donald Trump. They're not supporting Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump supporters don't get along. They don't like each other. They don't want to have anything to do with each other. Is there a little bit of crossover where people feel that, the DNC is corrupt and they don't want to have anything to do with the Democrats, and then they're going to switch over to Trump? Yes. A lot of that is just honestly like protest votes. Those are just votes. Those are just people voting, just to say like, oh, well, fuck the DNC and fuck the Democrats. I'm going to go and vote for the other party to stick it to them. I have tons of issues with that, with those kind of people. But do I understand that they have issues with the DNC and the corruptness and the corruption of the Democratic Party? Yes, I totally get that. I have an issue with that. If you ask any self-identified progressive out there, leftist, socialist, communist, whatever, they all have issues with the DNC too. That doesn't mean that all of them go and join Donald Trump and want to become Republicans or want to support Trump all of a sudden. That's ridiculous. So, but this is what they're doing. They're trying to dovetail the Bernie Sanders and the Donald Trump supporters together and then pretend as if they're the same, when in reality they're not even close. So as usual, it's just typical bullshit, and it's typical, rank propaganda from people that are upset that the Sanders supporters dare to have an opinion, and God forbid if they have an opinion on something, that's a terrible thing. You can't have an opinion when responding apparently to the you can't have a response to the corruption, or at least what they feel and what many and I feel was the corruption of what happened within the Working Families Party when they decided to choose Elizabeth Warren over Bernie Sanders. And by the way, there's, as I covered last week, there was a little bit of funny business going on when it came to like the supposedly superdelegates were allowed to vote in the Working Families Party who had like leadership roles. The votes of the leadership apparently meant more. It had more voting power as far as like how much it counted for, and that was chosen, that was kind of, that weighed more heavily basically. And there's also a situation where apparently, I think I read about it today on Twitter when I was looking around on Twitter. Apparently there was I think the daughter of Elizabeth Warren who bought votes from the Working Families Party. So she like essentially bribed people or kind of like kind of got around, like, try to get specific people that were voting on the Working Families Party to vote in favor of her mom. So this was Elizabeth Warren's daughter. So she basically kind of tried to get them be like, yeah, you know what, if you vote for her, she's going to help you guys out later on. So I mean, it was a little bit of like a lobbying effort essentially, and so apparently that happened, and so it's just a bunch of like totally shady things going on, and the Bernie Sanders supporters decided to speak out and say something. And these people get pissed off whenever the Bernie Sanders supporters speak out and protest or have something to say. Anytime you even you're a Bernie Sanders supporters or leftists or something, and you respond to kind of secretive stuff going on behind closed doors, they get upset and say, oh, how dare you say anything? You better shut the hell up. You better not, be spreading any conspiracy theories around. When in reality, a lot of them are legitimate accusations and a lot of legitimate, issues that Bernie Sanders supporters have with how the system is working. So anyway, like they're trying to, and so we're going to get, obviously, let's read the rest of this article here, but I want to get to those, specific people that, referred to some of the, Working Families Party leadership as, Uncle Tom, slave, the C word. So I'm going to get to the details on that and, exactly who that came from. So let's see here. It says... Okay, so let's read the rest of it here. It says, the letter goes on to say that many of its signatories, which include among many others Alicia Garza, co-founder of Black Lives Matter Global Network, Tarana Burke, founder and executive director of Me Too, and strategist and CNN commentator Angela Rye, can't stand her, and are no stranger to these kinds of attacks. That they're patently unacceptable and only work to further empower those who have real power over our lives. So just so you guys know, Angela Rye, I don't know who those other two people are. Angela Rye is a typical establishment, pundit on CNN that loves to go on there, strategist. She's a Democratic strategist. She just goes on there and just like whines about Trump all the time. Just, attacks Trump. And then obviously I think I've seen her in past, what you call like, segments, or even posting on Twitter about Bernie Rose and Bernie Sanders is, not a Democrat. And so she's typical. It's just bullshit, man. I can't stand that. I don't care if it's a black woman. I don't care if it's a white woman. I don't care if it's a black man. I don't care if it's a white man. That shit is annoying as hell no matter who it comes from. So yeah, like it's just typical coming from those kind of pundits. They just, they're so entitled and they feel like they can just say whatever they want. And just because this is a, black woman, she feels like she has some sort of standing to go out there and just accuse everybody of, all these Bernie Sanders supporters of being racist, when that is not even close to being representative of the Bernie Sanders movement. So anyway, it says here, says the letter, which you can read in full at the bottom of this post, concludes, we refuse to concede to white terror from the left as well as the right. See that? Look at that again. Once again, they're trying to make a parallel between the left and the right, and the white terror from the left. Oh my God. Okay. I can't wait to tell you guys who these people are that attacked them, attacked these members of the Working Families Party. We'll get to it. I'm grasping at the opportunity to tell you guys, the real details on this. But anyway, it says, we can argue about the differences between Sanders and Warren, but not if we can't be distinguished from our real opposition. As black leaders in this movement, we are calling on each other to keep reaching for each other, even when it gets hard, even when we disagree, even when we are disappointed. We demand that the Sanders campaign unequivocally denounce the racism in its ranks and issue a public statement separating themselves from these abhorrent attacks. God damn it, that is ridiculous. The whole Bernie Sanders campaign now has to speak on behalf of a couple people making comments. Oh, this is just like 2016. Unbelievable. And we call on our movement to recommit to the real fight ahead of us. Democracy isn't built in a day, and the WFP will need us, Sanders supporters and Warren supporters, to come together to defeat one of the most serious threats to peace and justice in our lifetimes. As if Donald Trump not being there is just going to make everything peaceful in this country and bring justice back to us. Are you kidding me? We cannot wait to make justice real amongst the resistors. We're not part of the fucking resistors. You're part of your own fucking resistors. We don't need you. Our lives literally depend on each other. Sorry for all that commentary in between. I just can't stand this shit. So annoying. Okay, and then it says Splinter reached out to the Working Families Party, the Warren campaign, and the Sanders campaign for comment on the letter. Earlier this afternoon, Sanders tweeted to condemn, quote, racist bullying and harassment of any kind. And then Bernie says in a tweet, this campaign condemns racist bullying and harassment of any kind in any space. We are building a multiracial movement for justice. That's how we win the White House. Hours later, Nina Turner, national co-chair for Bernie Sanders' campaign, was even more explicit. Anyone directing racist, sexist, and otherwise personally derogatory tweets / messages towards Maurice WFP, which is Maurice Mitchell, or anyone on his team at Working Families Party, is a coward and is not in alignment with Bernie Sanders or our collective mission. A spokesman with the Sanders campaign responded to questions by saying, quote, we condemn any hateful comments, and referred Splinter to the Sanders tweets. Warren's campaign and the Working Families Party did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Okay, so finally I get to comment on exactly what this big hoopla is about. So you'll be very surprised to find out that these alleged comments of, what was it, the Uncle Tom, slave, and the C word, apparently, according to what I saw on Twitter, apparently to what I think they even pointed to. In fact, they couldn't even really point to anything. These were just tweets that certain people found. I wish I could find you guys the tweets, but I remember specifically who they came from. One of the tweets was from a black man. Another tweet was from a Native American man. That's it. They found 2 tweets that attacked, I don't know, whoever it was from the Working Families Party. I guess the Maurice Mitchell guy. So that's it. They found 2 tweets. That's it. Nothing more than that. And I don't know. I guess those were the 2 people that said the Uncle Tom, slave, and the C word. That's it. That was their evidence. And then when people on Twitter tweeted out the Working Families Party and asked them to give like receipts and show like, okay, who said what are you referring to, they couldn't provide anything. They refused to provide anything. Now, the reality probably is, and like I said, other people who were, showing that, like, this was other progressives, obviously Sanders supporters, they came out and said, okay, these were the two people. These two people were condemned. But these two people, they made their comments, they were reported, and that means Sanders supporters reported them. They reported them, but they said these were the only two examples. And then when they asked for these kind of examples, or even more examples if they existed from the Working Families Party, they couldn't provide any. So they just come out and say just blatantly come out and say, okay, well, the Working Families Party is receiving tons of racist and sexist threats from people, and these are the these are the terrible things that they are saying. And then where are the examples? We don't know. They can't even give any examples. They couldn't provide anything. They couldn't provide any receipts. They couldn't do shit. So this is what they do. This is the same exact thing they did in 2016. And the fact that Nina Turner, who was one of the biggest supporters of Bernie Sanders, if not the biggest, and one of his biggest surrogates, she has been a victim of sexist and racist attacks. I've seen it. In fact, I wrote an article on Medium.com back in 2017. I wrote an article, and she tweeted me and said, thank you very much for writing this, and thank you for tracking down all these people and documenting all these tweets, these racist and sexist tweets that were said against me. So I spoke to her directly. She's a very nice lady, and I understand her coming out and saying that you should make these these attacks shouldn't be lobbed at these people, but where is anybody condemning the attacks that were made against her, or the attacks that have been made against other Bernie Sanders supporters, let alone Bernie himself, let alone Brianna Gray, which is the press secretary for Bernie Sanders? All these people are have suffered racist and sexist attacks. So even Bernie himself has been called he was called a fake Jew or something by this idiot fucking Hillary supporter, somebody that apparently even Neera Tanden was praising on Twitter, which is pathetic because Neera Tanden is an atrocious shill for Hillary Clinton. So she's going out and praising this person who's calling Bernie a fake Jew. Unbelievable. So anyway, but where are all the people condemning the attacks against Nina Turner? So anytime an attack happens against a Bernie Sanders supporter, shush, don't say anything. Don't say anything. You can't say that because it goes against the establishment narrative of supposedly Bernie Sanders supporters being sexist. So anytime that kind of stuff has to be called out, nobody wants to say shit. But anytime there's any kind of narrative of Bernie bros and sexist Bernie bros and racist Bernie bros, they come out with that shit like gangbusters, and they want to set that narrative. They want to put that narrative into the media so that everybody knows it, and everybody just keeps referring to Bernie Sanders as being Bernie Sanders supporters and Bernie Sanders being like Donald Trump and his supporters, which is ridiculous, like I said before. And nobody calls out the actual racism and sexism that goes on. And again, like I said before, when you come up with examples, you come up with two tweets. You come up with two tweets from a Native American person, Native American man, and an African American man. That's it. That was your best examples that you could come up with. You couldn't even come up with a white man. So you're obviously bullshitting. And let's just say, okay, somebody wants to say those were not really black. It was not really a black man and was not really a Native American man. But how can you prove that? You can't prove that. But based on the evidence, so based on the pictures that you could see in the person's bio, like the main avatar picture, it showed a black man and a Native American man. So that's it. So where is this? Where's your? At least if you're going to make the accusations, at least come out with evidence and proof and at least back it up with something. But they can't do that because they just want to go out there and frame Bernie Sanders supporters as being sexist and racist, and it's just absurd. And if a black man is going out there and calling somebody an Uncle Tom, I mean, okay, I wouldn't do it, but that's something that black men have said. Black people have called other black people Uncle Toms. So that's not my problem. I'm not calling anybody an Uncle Tom. They're the ones who are saying it. So if they want to say that, if a black person wants to say that to another black person, that's their problem. If a white person were to go out there and say that, that's a different story. I think that's pretty fucked up. I don't like to get into that kind of racist, sexist language. I don't think it's right. largely I like to avoid that. Sometimes, every now and then you're going to come out and say something that people are going to consider to be sexist or racist. But in reality, it's just people just getting triggered by words and getting upset and, trying to become the word police, which I deal with all the time on Twitter. I see it all the time on Twitter. Other people have dealt with it too. But anyway, the point is that these people are making up a narrative that's not true at all. They want to smear Bernie Sanders supporters. They want to smear Bernie Sanders. They don't give a shit about actual substance or focusing on policy. So they have to go and find something that frames this narrative away from the policy and just focuses on the identity and scandals and drama and bullshit like that. And this is honestly something that's being started by the establishment Democrats, because they want to once again do to Bernie Sanders what they did to him in 2016. The only difference now is they're trying to ignore him more. But then when they focus on the stories that hurt him, they really go hard on him. But for the most part, they try and avoid him because they don't want to put too much focus on them. They want to give more airtime to people like Bernie, to people like Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and stuff like that. So that's clearly the mentality here, and it's disgusting, and I can't stand it.